Picture this. You are sitting in a small cafe somewhere in Eastern Europe or Southeast Asia, and the woman at the next table, absolutely stunning, clearly educated, funny, warm, turns to you and starts a conversation. And before the afternoon is over, she has asked for your number, told you she has always dreamed of meeting someone from abroad, and invited you to dinner the following weekend. You are not in a movie. This actually happened to a friend of mine, and it changed his entire life. Now, a lot of people hear stories like that and immediately get skeptical. They assume there is a catch. They think desperation. They think something must be wrong with her. But what if I told you that in certain countries around the world, the demographic reality is so specific, the gender imbalance so pronounced, and the cultural context so layered that millions of perfectly wonderful, ambitious, emotionally available women genuinely prefer and actively seek relationships with men from other countries, not out of desperation, but out of a perfectly rational response to the world they live in? That is what we are talking about today. I am Julia, and I have spent the better part of the last 12 years traveling, living, dating, and studying relationship dynamics across more than 40 countries. I have interviewed hundreds of women about why they look beyond their own borders for love. And today, I'm going to walk you through the 7 countries where the so-called inverted demographics, where women significantly outnumber relationship-ready men, or where cultural conditions push women toward foreign partners, create a genuinely different dating landscape than anything most Western men have ever experienced. This is not a video about shortcuts or exploitation. This is a real, nuanced conversation about why certain countries produce this dynamic, what it looks like on the ground, and what a man who is genuinely interested in building something meaningful needs to understand before he shows up. Country 1, Ukraine. Let us start with Ukraine because it is probably the most talked about country in this conversation, and also the most misunderstood. Ukraine has had one of the most dramatic and heartbreaking demographic shifts of any country in modern history. Even before the full-scale war that began in 2022, Ukraine was dealing with decades of population challenges, significant emigration of working-age men to countries like Poland, Germany, and Italy in search of economic opportunity, a historically high male mortality rate driven by alcohol-related illness and industrial accidents, and birth rates that had been declining since the collapse of the Soviet Union. The result was a country that, for years before the world started paying attention, had somewhere between 3 and 5 million more women than men of marriageable age. Now add the events of recent years to that picture. Hundreds of thousands of men lost to war, millions of women displaced internally or living as refugees across Europe, navigating a completely new reality without a partner, without a community support system, and in many cases raising children alone. The scale of this is almost impossible to wrap your mind around. But here is what I want you to understand, because this is the part that often gets lost in the statistics. Ukrainian women are not victims of their demographics. They are one of the most educated, resilient, and emotionally sophisticated groups of women I have ever encountered in my travels. Ukraine has one of the highest female university graduation rates in the world. Women there study law, medicine, engineering, architecture, languages. They speak multiple languages fluently. They are culturally literate in a deep, specific way. Ukrainian women grow up reading Dostoevsky and Bulgakov, listening to jazz, appreciating opera, and engaging in philosophical conversation over tea that lasts 4 hours. The cultural expectations around partnership in Ukraine are also distinct from what most Western men are used to. Family is the center of everything. A Ukrainian woman is not looking for a situationship or a casual arrangement. She is looking for someone to build a life with, someone who will show up, be present, and take the relationship seriously. She wants to cook for you. She wants to meet your mother. She wants to know where this is going. What this creates, in practice, is a dating environment where women who would in any other country have their pick of a dozen eligible local partners are genuinely open to meeting foreign men. Not because foreign is automatically better, but because the pool at home has been so severely depleted that the idea of looking abroad feels not only acceptable, but necessary. When you go to Kyiv or Lviv or Odessa, even in their current challenged states, and you meet women in their late 20s and 30s, you are meeting people who have made peace with the reality of their situation and decided, often deliberately, that they are not going to wait around for a local market that may never recover. They are proactive. They are on the apps. They show up to international events. They learn English with intention. The man who does well here is the one who takes it seriously, who comes not as a tourist looking for an exotic experience, but as a person looking for a real connection, who understands, at least broadly, the history and the weight of what this country has been through, who is patient, respectful, and consistent. Because Ukrainian women have seen enough unreliability from circumstance, from men who left, from a world that keeps pulling the rug out from under them, that what they respond to more than anything is steadiness. If you are a man in your 30s, 40s, or even 50s who is genuinely ready for a committed partnership and you have overlooked Ukraine because the news cycle made it seem too complicated, I would gently push back on that. The complication is real, but so is the depth of connection available there. These are extraordinary women in an extraordinary time, and the ones who find good partners from abroad often build some of the most devoted, intentional relationships I have ever seen. Country 2. Russia. Moving from Ukraine to Russia might seem like a natural geographic progression, but the dynamics here are actually quite different, and in some ways more entrenched. Russia has one of the most severe gender imbalances of any large country on Earth. Depending on the region and age group, Russian women can outnumber men by margins of 10 to 15% among adults over 40, and the gap among younger people, while smaller, is still statistically significant. The root causes go back generations. The Soviet Union lost somewhere between 26 and 28 million people in World War II, the majority of them men, and demographic recovery from that catastrophe was never fully complete. Decades of harsh living conditions, high rates of cardiovascular disease, alcohol dependency, workplace accidents in industrial regions, and more recently military losses have continued to suppress male life expectancy. The average Russian man lives roughly 10 years less than the average Russian woman. Let that sit for a moment. 10 years. That is not a minor statistical blip. That is a generational pattern that shapes the entire emotional architecture of how women there relate to partnership, security, and the future. Russian women from major cities, Moscow, St. Petersburg, Novosibirsk, Yekaterinburg, tend to be highly educated, professionally ambitious, stylish in a very intentional way, and emotionally complex. They are not shy. They do not play the kind of soft ambiguity game that some Western dating cultures normalize. If a Russian woman is interested in you, you will know. If she is not, you will also know. And there is a clarity to that directness that many men who have dated there find deeply refreshing. The relationship between Russian women and foreign men has a long and complicated history. During the 90s, when the country was in economic freefall, the image of the mail-order bride became a cultural cliché that unfairly stigmatized what was actually, for many women, a rational escape from circumstances that offered very little. That era is over, but the residue of that stereotype unfortunately lingers in the Western imagination in ways that do a disservice to the actual women you would meet today. A Russian woman in her 30s who is interested in foreign men in the current era is typically someone who has already built a life for herself. She has a career, an apartment, a social circle, opinions, hobbies. She is not waiting to be rescued. She is looking for an equal partner who combines the qualities she finds missing in many of the local men she has encountered, namely emotional availability, sobriety, communicativeness, and genuine interest in her as a person, and not just a homemaker or status symbol. There is a cultural script in Russia that assigns very specific gender roles, and while many urban, educated Russian women navigate and even embrace parts of that script, they also quietly chafe against the expectation that their ambitions must stop the moment they become wives. Foreign men, in their experience, tend to be more supportive of a woman having her own professional identity, her own money, her own goals. That matters enormously to a certain type of Russian woman, and it is part of why she looks outward. The current geopolitical situation has made things more complicated, obviously. International access is restricted in ways that were unimaginable 5 years ago. But for men who are able to connect through online platforms, international communities, or who meet Russian women who are living abroad as students or workers in Europe, the connection remains as potent and real as it ever was. Russian women are adaptable, resilient, and deeply romantic in the literary sense of that word. They believe in the power of love with an almost old-fashioned intensity, and they bring that intensity to the relationships they choose. Country 3, the Philippines. Now we travel to the other side of the world, and everything changes. The climate, the culture, the language, the religion, the food. But the underlying dynamic of women actively seeking foreign partners remains. And in the Philippines, it takes a form that is uniquely its own. The Philippines is not a country with a severe gender imbalance in the numerical sense. The population is roughly balanced between men and women. The reason it appears on this list is fundamentally different. It is about cultural openness, economic aspiration, a deeply globalized mindset, and a specific historical relationship with Western culture that makes Filipino women among the most naturally comfortable with foreign relationships of any nationality on Earth. First, the English factor. The Philippines is the third largest English-speaking country in the world. English is not a foreign language learned in school. It is a language of daily life, of media, of professional communication, of text messages between friends. When a Filipino woman meets a man from the United States, Australia, the United Kingdom, or Canada, there is no language barrier in the conventional sense. She can express herself fully, joke naturally, argue passionately, be vulnerable in a language that does not feel foreign to her. This removes one of the most significant friction points in international dating immediately. Then there is the Catholic faith, which shapes the emotional and social DNA of most Filipino women in ways that are profound. The Philippines is more than 80% Catholic, and the values that accompany that faith, family loyalty, commitment to marriage, a belief in sacrifice and devotion as expressions of love, are not just theoretical. They are lived daily in the way women relate to the people they love. A Filipino woman who commits to you is not doing so lightly. She is doing so with the full weight of her upbringing, her community, and her faith behind that commitment. Family is everything in the Philippines, and I mean that almost literally. When you enter a relationship with a Filipino woman, you are entering a relationship with her entire extended family. Aunts, cousins, grandparents, neighbors who have been honorary family members since childhood. This can feel overwhelming to men who come from cultures where family and romantic partnership are more separate. But if you embrace it rather than resist it, it becomes one of the most beautiful and nourishing aspects of the relationship. You are not just gaining a partner, you are gaining a community. Filipino women are warm in a way that is genuinely rare. There is a concept called malasakit, a word that does not translate perfectly into English but means something like deep care and concern for another person's well-being. It is not performative. It is not transactional. It is just the natural orientation that many Filipino women bring to the people they love. If you are sick, she is making you soup. If you are stressed, she is asking what she can do. If you are far away, she is texting good morning every single day. The aspiration factor is real, and I will not pretend otherwise. Many Filipino women do hope that a foreign partner will provide a more stable economic future, and some of that hope is wrapped up in dreams of emigration. But the man who approaches this honestly and with genuine care rarely finds it to be a problem, because Filipino women are also hardworking, resourceful, proud, and deeply unwilling to be in a relationship that feels like charity. They want partnership. They want to contribute. They want a man who sees them as a full human being, not a dependent. Where to find them? Manila, Cebu, Davao, the Visayas. Dating apps are enormously popular there. Filipinos are among the most active social media users on Earth. International events, church communities, expatriate circles, all of these are natural meeting grounds. The key, always, is showing up with genuine interest in the culture and the person, and not with the attitude of someone shopping for a submissive wife. Filipino women are not submissive. They are gracious, warm, and genuinely loving. But they also have backbone, opinions, humor, and a quiet fierceness that surprises men who underestimate them. Country 4. Colombia, from the Pacific to South America and specifically to Colombia, a country that has undergone one of the most remarkable reputation transformations of the 21st century. For decades, Colombia's global image was defined almost entirely by drug violence and political instability. Today, it is increasingly recognized as one of the most vibrant, culturally rich, and romantically fascinating countries in the world. Medellin was named the most innovative city on the planet. Bogotá has a culinary scene that rivals any European capital. Cartagena is a UNESCO World Heritage City of breathtaking colonial beauty. And Colombian women are, by nearly any measure, among the most passionately celebrated in all of Latin America. The demographics here operate differently again. The gender imbalance in Colombia is not as extreme as in Eastern Europe, but there is a significant social factor at play: the disproportionate impact of decades of violence and instability on the male population. Young men in Colombia have faced extraordinary mortality rates from conflict, gang activity, and urban violence throughout the last several generations. The result is a country where marriageable age women outnumber suitable men not just in raw numbers, but in what sociologists sometimes call partner quality index, the gap between the kind of partner a woman hopes for and the realistic pool available to her locally. Add to this the extreme income inequality that still defines much of Colombian society, and you get a dynamic where educated, ambitious Colombian women, particularly those who have gone to university, traveled, learned English, built professional lives, often find that their expectations have outpaced what the local dating market can offer. They want a man who is emotionally mature, stable, present, interested in their mind as well as their body. They want someone who will not see a career-driven woman as a threat to his masculinity. And they increasingly turn to the idea of foreign partners as one answer to that search. Colombian women bring something to a relationship that is almost impossible to describe adequately without sounding like a cliché: a physical and emotional aliveness that fills a room. They laugh with their whole bodies. They dance not as a performance, but as a natural expression of joy. They cook with love and pride. They argue with passion and make up with equal fervor. They are not trying to be cool or detached. Emotional availability is not something you have to coax out of a Colombian woman. It is the baseline. The warmth extends to family. Colombian family culture is as intense as any in the world. Familia primero, family first, is not a slogan. It is a lived reality. Sunday lunches that last 5 hours, grandmothers who are consulted on major life decisions, cousins who are closer than most people's siblings. This is the world you are stepping into. And again, for men who embrace it rather than feel smothered by it, it is an extraordinary thing to belong to. What Colombian women consistently say about why they find foreign men appealing is revealing. Many of them mention communication. They talk about how local cultural norms can make emotional vulnerability in men feel almost taboo, how the machismo tradition, even as it softens in younger generations, still creates men who have difficulty saying, "I am sorry," "I need help," or "I love you," with any consistency. Foreign men, particularly from Northern Europe, North America, and Australia, are perceived as more willing to communicate directly, more comfortable with emotional expression, and more likely to treat a woman's opinions and feelings as genuinely worthy of consideration. Medellin, in particular, has become a kind of epicenter for international romantic connections. The city is full of digital nomads, retirees, entrepreneurs, and travelers who have come and often stayed. There is an established international community, excellent infrastructure for meeting people, and a dating app culture that is as active as anywhere in the world. Bogotá is larger, more intense, more politically sophisticated. Cartagena is the romantic fantasy in physical form: ocean, colonial architecture, salsa floating out of doorways. Each city offers a distinct flavor of Colombian femininity, and all three are worth experiencing. The man who succeeds with Colombian women is the one who is genuine. They have excellent radar for performance and insincerity. Women who live in a culture built on relationship and community become very good at reading people quickly. Come as yourself, come with respect, learn a few words of Spanish even if your accent is terrible, ask about her life, and actually listen to the answer. And you will be amazed at how naturally and generously a Colombian woman opens up. Country 5. Thailand. Thailand is one of the most visited countries on Earth, and it is also one of the most frequently misunderstood, particularly when it comes to relationships between Thai women and foreign men. There is a version of Thailand and dating that exists in the Western imagination, and it is not a flattering one. It involves a specific geography, a specific industry, and a set of assumptions that, while not entirely fabricated, apply to a very small and specific slice of a country of 70 million people. What I want to do today is set that picture aside and talk about a much larger and more interesting reality. The millions of Thai women from middle-class and upper-middle-class families, from universities and corporations and hospitals and startups, who are navigating a genuinely challenging domestic dating landscape, and who increasingly look to foreign men not as economic lifelines but as emotionally compatible partners. The gender imbalance in Thailand manifests differently from Eastern Europe. Thailand actually has a slightly higher female-to-male ratio than many countries, but the more significant dynamic is what is sometimes called the quality gap, a cultural situation in which many Thai men, particularly those from more traditional backgrounds, are perceived by educated, independent Thai women as less emotionally available, less communicative, and more likely to engage in infidelity as a kind of normalized behavior. Thai society, in its traditional form, has long tolerated certain behaviors in men: multiple relationships, limited emotional communication, a prioritization of social face over authentic intimacy that younger, educated Thai women increasingly find intolerable. A Thai woman who has studied at Chulalongkorn University, who works in finance or technology, who travels and reads and thinks carefully about what she wants from life, is simply not willing to accept the old arrangement. And when she looks around at the men in her professional and social circles, she often finds that many of them are still operating on the old script. Foreign men, from her vantage point, offer something different. And I say this carefully and with nuance, because I am describing a perception, a real one that I have heard articulated by many Thai women, not a universal truth about all foreign men, who are obviously as varied as any other group. But the perception matters. The perception is that foreign men are more likely to be emotionally present, more likely to value her independence, more willing to communicate openly about feelings, and more likely to treat monogamy as a genuine standard rather than a negotiation. Thailand is also a country where Buddhism shapes the emotional landscape in profound ways. The Thai worldview, deeply influenced by Theravada Buddhist principles, emphasizes inner peace, non-confrontation, gentleness, and the idea that how you make someone feel is more important than what you literally say. Thai women in relationships want to feel cherished, protected, and respected, not in a showy, performative way, but in the quiet, consistent way of someone who has genuinely internalized that the other person matters. Bangkok is the obvious starting point, a city of extraordinary energy and social possibility, with a thriving international community, world-class restaurants, and a dating app culture that rivals any major metropolis. But Chiang Mai in the north offers a completely different experience, more intimate, more artisan, more intellectually focused, with a large community of digital nomads and a beautiful Thai woman who has chosen to stay in her hometown despite opportunities elsewhere, radiating a groundedness that is profoundly appealing. The islands, Koh Samui, Phuket, Koh Lanta, exist in their own social world, more transient, but still full of genuine connection if you approach with patience and authenticity. The cultural learnings for foreign men in Thailand are significant and worth taking seriously. Learn even a handful of Thai words. The effort alone communicates respect in a way that is immediately recognized and appreciated. Understand the central role of family, and particularly of parents, in a Thai woman's life and decisions. Never raise your voice or express anger in a way that causes a scene. The concept of saving face is not a minor social nicety in Thailand. It is a foundational value. and violating it publicly causes a rupture that can be very difficult to repair. And understand that Thai warmth, the famous Thai smile, is genuine, but also multi-layered. It takes time, consistency, and real interest to get beneath the gracious surface to the deep, rich emotional life underneath. The women who are worth knowing in Thailand are the ones who see you not as a passport or a paycheck, but as a human being whose origins happen to be somewhere else in the world. They are out there in enormous numbers, and when you find one, the combination of gentleness and depth in her personality is something you tend not to forget. Country 6. Brazil. Brazil is, in almost every sense that matters to this conversation, one of the most extraordinary countries on earth for the intersection of culture, femininity, passion, and demographic complexity. And it is one of the least understood, at least in terms of the deeper dynamics beneath the obvious surface. Let me start with what everyone already knows, because we cannot avoid it. Brazilian women are celebrated globally for physical beauty in a way that is almost mythological. The beaches, the bodies, the carnival, the samba, this is real. Brazil is one of the most physically expressive cultures on the planet, and the beauty there is diverse in a way that reflects the extraordinary racial mixing of Portuguese colonial history, indigenous roots, African heritage, Italian and German immigration, Japanese communities in São Paulo that date back a century. The physical diversity is stunning, but beauty is the thing that gets talked about most and understood least, and I want to go deeper. Brazil has significant demographic challenges that fly under the radar of most international conversations. The country has extremely high rates of male incarceration. Brazil has one of the largest prison populations in the world, and the demographics of who is incarcerated skews heavily male and heavily from disadvantaged communities. Violence takes a disproportionate toll on young men, particularly in urban peripheries. And the economic inequality that defines much of Brazilian society creates a dating landscape where educated, professional women, and Brazil has produced enormous numbers of women, doctors, lawyers, engineers, and executives, often find themselves genuinely misaligned with the available male population in their social sphere. Brazilian women in major cities, São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Belo Horizonte, Curitiba, are sophisticated, professionally formidable, and deeply aware of their own desirability. They do not lack confidence. They do not carry the quiet uncertainty that you sometimes see in women from countries where gender equality has historically been more suppressed. A Brazilian woman knows what she brings to a relationship, and she is not afraid to say so. What she is often looking for in a foreign partner is not someone who offers more in a material sense. She is fully capable of providing for herself, but someone who offers more in an emotional sense. Brazilian men are known, broadly and with the usual caveat, that all generalizations are imperfect, for a kind of emotional inconsistency that leaves many women feeling unsatisfied. The passion is real, the jealousy is real, the romance is real, but so is the infidelity, the emotional immaturity in certain cultural expressions of masculinity, and the tendency to prioritize ego over accountability. A Brazilian woman who has had several relationships with local men and has seen this pattern repeat often comes to the conclusion that she wants something different. And when she encounters a foreign man who communicates clearly, shows up consistently, takes her seriously as an intellectual equal, and handles conflict with maturity rather than drama, she responds with a depth of feeling and devotion that is almost overwhelming in the best possible way. The concept of jeitinho brasileiro, the Brazilian way of finding a workaround, a solution, a creative path through difficulty, applies to relationships too. Brazilian women are adaptable, resourceful, warm, and enormously fun. Life with a Brazilian partner tends to involve a great deal of laughter, food, dancing, extended family chaos, passionate disagreements that resolve into equally passionate reconciliations, and a general sense that being alive is an extraordinary gift that should be celebrated as often as possible. São Paulo is the city of serious relationships, cosmopolitan, intellectually rigorous, economically dynamic, full of women who have careers and opinions and complicated lives. Rio is the city of romance, the light on the water, the mountains at the back of everything, the ocean always nearby, a sense that beauty is the natural state of things. The interior of Brazil, Minas Gerais with its colonial towns, the Northeast with its extraordinary culture and music, offers a completely different kind of Brazilian woman, more rooted, more traditional in certain respects, but no less warm or complex. Learn Portuguese if you are serious. Not because English will not work in major cities, it often will, but because speaking someone's language is an act of love. It says, "Your world matters enough to me that I am willing to change in order to participate in it." That message lands beautifully everywhere in the world, and in Brazil, where language is so bound up with music and poetry and expression, it lands with particular force. Country 7, Japan. Our final country is Japan, and it is perhaps the most surprising entry on this list. Not because Japanese women are unknown as partners for foreign men, but because the reasons Japan appears here are genuinely unlike any of the other 6 countries, and they reveal something fascinating and somewhat melancholy about modern Japanese society. Japan does not have a severe gender imbalance in the demographic sense. The population is relatively balanced. What Japan has, and what places it firmly in this conversation, is what sociologists call the herbivore men phenomenon. A generational shift in Japanese masculinity that has seen a significant percentage of Japanese men disengage from dating, romance, and the pursuit of relationships altogether. Studies have consistently shown that a substantial proportion of Japanese men in their 20s and 30s identify as having no interest in romantic relationships, no desire to date, and no intention of marrying. The reasons are complex: economic pressure, housing costs, social anxiety, the seductive alternative of parasocial connections through anime, virtual reality companions, and gaming. But the result is that millions of Japanese women who want a serious relationship are living in a country where a significant portion of the male population has effectively opted out of participating in one. This creates a situation that is, from the outside, almost incomprehensible. Japan is a highly developed, extremely well-educated, economically sophisticated society where a woman who is funny, beautiful, accomplished, and desperately wanting a loving partnership might spend years unable to find one, not because she is not desirable, but because the men around her have retreated from the entire arena of romantic pursuit. Japanese women who want foreign partners are often very specific about why. They talk about directness. Japanese social communication involves layers of indirectness and implication that can make romantic intentions essentially invisible. And foreign men who simply say what they mean and how they feel are experienced as refreshingly clear. They talk about attentiveness, the sense that a foreign man is genuinely interested in her as an individual, asking questions, remembering details, making plans, rather than expecting the relationship to simply drift forward on its own momentum. They talk about physical affection, public expressions of tenderness that are still somewhat unusual in Japanese culture, feel natural and wonderful to many women who encounter them through foreign partners. Japanese women are, as a group, exceptionally thoughtful. There is a cultural depth to life in Japan. The tea ceremony, the attention to seasonal change, the concept of omotenashi, which means total selfless hospitality, that produces women with a profound sense of how to care for others. A Japanese woman who commits to you will pay attention to you with an intensity and a thoroughness that can be quite astonishing. She notices your food preferences and quietly accommodates them. She remembers the thing you mentioned in passing 3 months ago. She creates beauty in the small details of daily life, the way a meal is presented, the arrangement of flowers in a room, the perfectly folded note tucked into a bag, because to her, these small acts of beauty are expressions of love. The challenge for foreign men in Japan is understanding the pace. Relationships develop slowly. Trust is built through time and consistency, not grand gestures. A Japanese woman does not rush toward vulnerability. She approaches it incrementally, watching to see if you are safe, if you are real, if you will still be there in 3 months when she has finally let her guard down a little more. Patience is not optional here. It is the price of admission. Tokyo is the natural starting point, a city of 13 million people where every subculture and social world coexists in a kind of organized chaos. The international districts, the creative communities of Shimokitazawa and Nakameguro, the language exchange events, the expat-inclusive social clubs. All of these are places where Japanese women who are interested in foreign connection gather and participate. Osaka is warmer, funnier, more immediately open in a way that surprises many people who expect all of Japan to be reserved. Kyoto carries the full weight of Japanese cultural history and attracts women who are deeply connected to that heritage. Fukuoka in the south is smaller and more intimate and offers a kind of genuine daily life Japan that is sometimes lost in the larger cities. Learn some Japanese, even a few phrases. The cultural appreciation this demonstrates is enormous, and Japanese people respond to it with a warmth that somewhat contradicts the stereotype of the reserved Japanese personality. The reserve is real, but it is a surface, not a wall. And a foreign man who approaches with genuine curiosity, respect, and a willingness to be a little bit awkward and humble is someone who tends to find that surface gives way to something extraordinarily rich underneath. What makes Japan particularly poignant in this conversation is that the women here are not looking for foreign men because their country has been through war or economic collapse. They are looking outward because their own society has, in certain very specific ways, failed to create a romantic environment that works for them. That is a quieter kind of heartbreak, but it is real. And for a man who is ready to show up with consistency, patience, and genuine care, the Japanese women he might meet are extraordinary people who will bring an unparalleled depth of devotion and thoughtfulness to a partnership. Closing thoughts. So there you have it. 7 countries, 7 completely distinct cultural realities, and one common thread: women who are ready, willing, and sometimes actively hoping to build a meaningful relationship with a man who comes from somewhere else. I want to close with this. The conversations I have had with women in all 7 of these countries, over many years and many cups of tea and coffee and whatever local drink seemed appropriate to the moment, have consistently pointed to the same thing. These women are not interested in a passport holder or a lifestyle upgrade. They are interested in what every person who has ever been in love has been interested in: someone who sees them, chooses them, and stays. The demographic context explains why they look outward, but what they are looking for when they get there is entirely, deeply, universally human. If you are a man watching this and feeling called to explore one of these countries, I would ask you to carry that understanding with you. Approach these women as fully realized human beings with histories and hopes and complicated inner lives. Learn something about the place before you arrive. Be honest about who you are and what you want. Be patient. Be consistent. Be kind. The world is full of extraordinary women who are ready for exactly the relationship you are also hoping to find. Sometimes geography is the only thing standing between you and them. And geography, as it turns out, is entirely possible to overcome. I am Julia. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If this conversation resonated with you, leave a comment below. I read every single one. Subscribe if you want more of this kind of honest, nuanced travel and dating content. And wherever you are in the world right now, I hope you find exactly what you are looking for.